So thank you so much for joining us. I don't know how much you can see, but we have folks here from the ecosystem. And we were just talking, our VP of ecosystem, Justin Rice, and I were just talking about crypto winter. And I started that conversation by saying I started in the crypto space in 2019, and that was just normal for me. And then all of a sudden last year happened, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And then this year happened, and people are like, oh, it's crypto winter. So with you having been, and I came from government, so I didn't in even a different industry have that experience. So you've had experience in media, in fintech, in nonprofit fundraising, things like that. Can you help us to give a little bit of perspective? Is this crypto winter some unique phenomenon that we all should be spending a lot of time worrying and talking about, or is this something that you've seen in other areas? Oh, we can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Yep. Yes. Now we can.
Great.
Go ahead.
Obviously when something like a winter happens in any industry, it's something absolutely worthy of paying attention to without question. But I think it helps to kind of brace oneself and push through it when you can set it in the context of history and what's happened in other industries that are analogous, as well as in our own. I mean, in the back in the day, not to date myself, but we have had situations in the past where if you look at the internet and its evolution, or technology and its kind of arc, I think between 95 and the internet's peak in 2000, the NASDAQ rose 400%, but then it fell 78% from its peak by October 2002. And so you had the dot-com boom and then the dot-com bust. Mm-hmm. But of course, here we are today, and Amazon is still thriving, and then we've had many other companies emerge since that are now just household brand names: Uber, Airbnb, Wayfair. I could go on. It's really quite. I mean, Netflix wasn't really around in the way that it is now, and so we're experiencing something similar, but I'm very, very optimistic that this too shall pass, because this is probably depending on who you ask and what your criteria are for what a crypto winter is, we've probably had 4 or 5 of these at least, certainly since Circle's been in business since 2013. And they're kind of, it will pass. It will pass. There are those of us who are continuing to work really hard through all of this. And I think what you're also seeing is kind of a grand culling of some companies that are perhaps not as, they're not here to stay. Their business models aren't robust enough. And so that also is just a natural course of kind of evolution of an industry like this. And crypto in particular, it's not a terrible thing, because you have, we're obviously all stewards of people's money or investments. There's value going back and forth. And so making sure that the companies that are sticking around are really working very hard to continue working within regulatory bounds and all of those good things, like some of the work we're doing with you guys and so forth. So I mean, back to your question, it is absolutely of concern. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. However, if you set it in the context of history, you realize that this will pass. You just have to keep soldiering through it.
Yeah. Well, I did not have the privilege of being at Converge because I was at another event, but I have heard and I've seen lots of pictures and things. It didn't sound like that felt like a crypto winter, because you guys have put on an amazing event. And I'm curious, just speaking more specifically to Circle, what have you done as the COO and leading the direction of the company? What have you done to navigate your path through this crypto winter? Hopefully it will pass as you predict. Yeah. And but what adjustments have you made? What's your strategy?
Yeah. So I think someone recently told me, made a really great analogy with the animal kingdom, where there's two responses to winter. There's dormancy or deep work. And so you have groundhogs who hibernate whereas you have, and they're like their heart rate falls, they sleep until spring, and then you've got beavers who don't hibernate. I happen to be a huge fan of beavers. They plan, they improve their dams, they store food, they raise, their babies, and they're basically ushering in the next spring. And so that's kind of what Circle's been doing. We're the beaver in this case, along with our friends and partners like Stellar. We're working through it, and I think.
We lost your audio. Hold on.
Can you hear
second.
me?
Yep, you're back.
Oh,
you're back.
Okay. All right.
Technology.
Yeah, exactly. We love it. Just let me know if that happens again.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we are kind of like the beaver. We're pushing through, and I think the main things that we're focusing on, frankly, are not much different than what we were focusing on before this happened. So, for example, one thing is mainstream adoption. Circle's role is to push stablecoin market infrastructure, as well as create a platform on which companies can build for utility value, for example. And so when we announce major partnerships with mainstream enterprise companies like Block or Stripe or Robinhood, as we did 2 weeks ago, that's part of what you're seeing. It's part of a very concerted, intended strategy to focus on accelerating mainstream adoption. There's other ways to look at mainstream adoption, which is when you look at, for example, some of our impact work, the work we've done with you guys, the work we're doing moving billions of dollars of USDC reserves to community banks and minority depository institutions. We're trying to find new and the easiest ways possible. We're constantly trying to make it easier to fund disaster relief and financial literacy programs, or financial literacy, something we're already doing. Disaster relief is something we're kind of constantly trying to work on to play our part. And so there's that, and that's all about creating a better, more inclusive financial system. I think the other thing that we're doing a ton of is really trying to build trust. We've been doing this since 2013. We always want, for USDC, we want it to be the most boring chart in crypto. A USDC equals $1, period. Nothing goes up, nothing goes down. And that trust is the foundation of all of our ambitions. So if we win trust, we believe that then in turn means we grow the USDC ecosystem. We add to, we can grow the mainstream use cases. In so doing, we win even more trust. It becomes this flywheel for us, which is why you see us in front of regulators and policymakers and trying to help the regulators regulate us, et cetera. But those are kind of three examples of things that we've been really doing, which are, we're not doing them in reaction to the winter. We've actually been doing them all along. We're just doubling down and continuing to soldier through it.
Yeah. And do you feel like because of that crypto winter, you've been able to focus more or less on particular pieces of those examples that you gave, or do you feel like it really was like the strategy didn't miss a beat? And
yeah, that's a very interesting question. On the one hand, the strategy hasn't really missed a beat at all. We know these things are what are going to land us on the right side of history and keep it, what are going to keep us on the right side of history. I think what it does do is, to the extent that these chilly periods cull out some of the players who perhaps are not like-minded in terms of operating within a regulatory perimeter and so forth, who seem to forget that we are managing people's money at the end of the day. We are taking on the care and feeding of making sure that a transaction goes from A to B and actually arrives safely. That when you give us $1, we can prove to you every 30 days that there's $1 sitting in a normal old bank account that you can go and get your $1 out, and you'll only ever get $1 if you redeem it through us, and so on and so forth. It helps our message get through. It separates it takes the noise to signal ratio is much more to our advantage, because if you didn't have incidents like we had this spring with other quote unquote stable coins, and for sure all stable coins are not created equal, we found ourselves answering questions and defending the industry as a kind of monolithic thing to policymakers. And frankly, to the market. I mean, if you're talking to a large enterprise company, on the other side of the table, they're going to naturally ask you as well, how do you differentiate yourself from this? This terrible thing just happened. Why are you different? Well, it's awfully nice when you don't actually have to talk about that too much anymore right now, because those players have now been weeded out. And so it does help focus the conversations we have with the outside world, certainly, while it doesn't necessarily impact the focus that we have had on some of these pillars I just mentioned earlier. But the conversations with the outside world, it certainly helps.
Yes, and as I have the privilege of speaking alongside and with many of your colleagues on the policy side, and it's really great. You know, USDC is really one of the standard setters and an example that we can point to, because we too care a lot about stable coins, both USDC and others that are issued on the Stellar network, and being able to have that audience. And it's, you know, because of some of the blow-ups, for lack of a better term, we definitely have had more interest and more focus on really understanding what are the steps that help to build that trust.
Sure.
Because you're absolutely true. I mean, trust is this word that we use in the ecosystem in so many different ways. You know, you have trustless, the decentralized ledger, but you also, with a stable coin, obviously there's a different type of trust that you all have been really leading the way in building that. I wanted to ask you, so I've also get to work with your folks on the impact team, and so I'm very excited about some of the use cases that you mentioned. I think Circle sits in a position somewhat like the SDF, where we get to see an ecosystem and we see how creative people can be building on the rails that are the Stellar network. You have this asset that has this trust, that has this value that people turn to when they want to leverage the blockchain technology. Are there any particular use cases, whether or not they're partnerships that Circle has specifically, or that you've seen, like, oh wow, they used USDC for that, solved that real world problem? Are there use cases that get you excited?
I think the one of the use cases that really excited me back in the day, which was at the early moments of the pandemic, and this is all on our website, so we can talk about it. But we teamed up with various ecosystem partners, and this was also blessed by the right people in the right corners of government, of course, but to get money into the hands of frontline workers in Venezuela, and those people could then, you know, pull it out put it into their bank account. They could use the wallet that was set up with the partner to just hang on to the USDC, et cetera. But money otherwise that aid money would not have gotten into their hands. And so in that case, we had a number of partners who all played their own part of that partnership, and we were able to solve the last mile problem, for example, and get money into the hands of those folks. That's often the trickiest part, is finding a partner that will do the KYC on the end of the ultimate receiver of the funds. And so that's just one of those examples that just speaks to everybody. It speaks to anyone understands that, and they understand it because it also you realize, wow, we can really do some good here. We can really fulfill our mission to raise global economic prosperity, and our mission, of course, is so similar to Stellar's in that regard. I think there are commercial use cases that are arising that I think in addition to of course, there's the crypto markets infrastructure. When you're thinking about something like a stable coin, you have to get it out into the ecosystem. And early on, one of the ways you do that is you work a lot with market makers and institutional trading partners and folks like that. But the mainstream use cases where it's actually being used as for flow of funds and things like that, a lot of what we see, of course, it won't surprise you, is cross-border, and the idea that you can send money with such in such an easier way than you do today, and that the concept that money can really travel at the speed of the internet and really travel just like no one talks about a cross-border email. Why do we talk about cross-border payments? It's kind of crazy. But even within countries, what we're seeing are interesting use cases where, if you're a supplier and you're getting paid by someone, there's that whole world of financing off of invoices that haven't been paid yet. If you can accelerate the speed with which the payments get made, then those companies in turn don't have to wait for their loans to come in, which means they can then invest in their business, which means it ends up probably also in the pockets of their employees. These are the types of things that we're seeing right now that are really fascinating. Many of the use cases are still limited to the crypto world. So you've got crypto native companies working with crypto native companies, NFTs and so forth would be a great example of that. But because of when we talk about companies like, whether it's, MoneyGram and that partnership or Stripe or Robinhood, et cetera, this is when it's getting particularly exciting, because now we're starting to build that bridge. So much of what companies like you and us do is build bridges between Web3 and Web2, between crypto and mainstream. And when you actually get those massive players committing to working with you and trying to figure this out, that's when the rubber's going to meet the road, and we're going to start seeing some really interesting mainstream use cases.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're pointing that out on the business side. We often at SDF, we love to talk about the MoneyGram use case, and we talk about the user experience and getting on and off. But there's also this benefit to MoneyGram, right? That instant settlement on the back end that they have with Circle is also a huge benefit to their business. So we sometimes get very focused on our access points, and at least I do think about the benefit to the business. So it's not just a user experience.
Sure.
Okay, so I want to shift gears just a little and ask you. So in the U.S. in particular, there's a lot of debate about whether or not there should be a central bank digital currency. And obviously there's a USDC and this very strong stablecoin. There are other stablecoins that are backed by U.S. dollars. And so I'm just curious your opinion on whether or not that's something that can happen, should happen. Would it threaten the USDC? What are your views on a U.S. dollar CBDC, which clearly is not happening anytime soon? So we can talk about it as
right. It's definitely not happening anytime soon. I think this is a very, very frequent question we get, and it kind of boils down to also can CBDCs and stablecoins coexist? And the answer is absolutely yes. There's just the reality, though, is that there's no guarantee that governments worldwide are going to decide that launching one is worthwhile. Even China's CBDC is still kind of technically in the pilot phase. But even if the U.S. were to decide to launch a CBDC, as you just said, it would take a long time, probably years, maybe decades, but definitely years for it to come to the market. I mean, look at all the work that Circle's been doing. And that if you even combine all the stable coins in the world together, it's taken quite a while to get where we are. But the kind of, I think what governments, particularly the U.S., needs to understand is that the fastest way to disrupt the very financial system that's made the U.S. the economic and political envy of the world would be to really just succumb to the pressures of launching a centralized digital currency. And while U.S. banking and financial systems can improve, how it deals with cyber threats and things like that, CBDCs would definitely disrupt the two-tiered banking system, and they would provide possibly uncertain outcomes for consumers and markets. One of my colleagues, Dante Disparte, loves this analogy, and I'm going to totally steal it here because
the FAA.
You think about the FAA.
Give it to us.
And it's a great one because the FAA plays this vital role in making sure that we have safe air travel. But, when was the last time you flew on an FAA plane? Right. So the federal government plays an indispensable role in ensuring the safe transmission of money, but it's just not clear that we need a CBDC in the United States. And generally speaking, governments aren't as well equipped to build out, very sort of bleeding edge technical innovation. However, I'll go back to my very first point. If it were to be that a CBDC was released into the world, we would absolutely be able to coexist. We believe that, we don't want to end up in a kind of, I'm really going to date myself now, but in a kind of what was it, a VHS and NTSC PAL war between, different regions as to which video format you can use, which one works in your TV. We don't want to get there. This certainly won't be mainstream adoption if these stable coins aren't able to, for example, talk to each other and be interoperable. We've been building lots of bridging infrastructure and chain infrastructure for that reason, et cetera. But long story short, we're not convinced the CBDC is going to get launched anytime soon, but if it does, we'll welcome it to the party, and we'll all be friends.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we have that was a very, to me, optimistic view of the crypto winter and how we're going to weather it. We're going to all be beavers like Circle, and we're going to build and work on real life use cases to solve real life problems. And best of luck with forging that path. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good luck with the rest of the conference.
All right. Thank you.